Have you ever had a moment where you completely forgot who you were? I don't mean amnesia, I mean those rare, breathtaking moments where the voice in your head just stops. Maybe you were staring at a sunset, lost in a piece of music, or running until your mind went totally blank. For a brief second, the constant commentary, the planning, the worrying, the judging disappeared. You were not a person with a name, a bank account, a messy past, or an anxious future. You were just awareness. Most of us spend our entire lives trapped inside a biological cage. We call it me. We spend every working hour feeding it, protecting it, and polishing it. But what happens when that ego finally quiets down? What does it actually feel like to lose your sense of I? Today we are going to explore this exact phenomenon through two completely different lenses that are unexpectedly saying the same thing: modern neuroscience and the ancient Eastern wisdom. To understand what it feels like to lose the ego, we first have to understand how the brain constructs it. For a long time, scientists wonder what the brain does when we are not doing anything at all. When you are just sitting on a couch, staring at the ceiling, what is your brain up to? In the early 2000s, neuroscientists discovered something fascinating. When you stop focusing on the outside world, a massive interconnected network of brain region lights up like a Christmas tree. They name it the default mode network, or the DMN. The DMN is the biological home of your ego. It is the part of your brain responsible for mind wandering, time travel, meaning, thinking about the past, or worrying about the future, and what scientists call self-referential processing. Basically, it is the storyteller. It takes everything that happens to you and waves into a narrative called the story of me. When your DMN is running on high gear, you are trapped in that story. You are thinking about that embarrassing thing you said 3 years ago, or worrying about an email you have to send tomorrow. It is an incredibly exhausting place to live. In fact, an overactive DMN is heavily linked to clinical depression and anxiety. It is a literal cage of self-obsession. But here is what it gets interesting. When neuroscientists put advanced meditators, people who have spent thousands of hours in the deep meditation, into the functional MRI scanners, they saw something radical. During deep meditation, the default mode network does not just slow down, it essentially shuts off. When the DMN quiets down, the brain regions that separate you from the outside world lose their strict boundaries. The neurological line between internal thought and the external reality blurs. Subjectively, this feels like an absolute explosion of freedom. Without the DMN constantly telling you who you are, where you end, and where the world begins, the ego dissolves. The heavy burden of being someone lifts, leaving behind a profound sense of peace, openness, and deep connection to everything around you. Long before the MRI scanners and neuroscientists discovered that the default mode network, ancient Eastern traditions were mapping this exact same territory using nothing but the human mind. They realized that the ego is not a solid permanent thing, it is an illusion. Let's look at how two different philosophical traditions describe what happens when this illusion breaks down. First, let's look at Buddhism and the concept of Anatta. Anatta literally translates to no self or non-self. The Buddha taught that if you look closely at your mind, you will never find a permanent, unchanging you. Think about you. Are you your body? Your body is constantly changing. Its cells are entirely replaced every few years. Are you your thoughts? Your thoughts appear out of nowhere and disappear seconds later. Are you your emotions? Emotions are like the weather, stormy one minute, sunny the next. Buddhism suggests that the ego is like a tornado. A tornado looks like a solid, terrifying object, but if you look inside, it is just wind and debris moving in a certain pattern. If the wind stops, the tornado vanishes. When the ego quiets down in the Buddhist tradition, you realize there is no solid core inside of you. You realize that you are not the thinker of your thoughts. You are simply the space in which thoughts happen. And when you realize there is no self to protect, all fear, anxiety, and suffering evaporate. Now, let's look at a different perspective that lands in a remarkably similar place. Advaita Vedanta, an ancient school of Hindu philosophy. While Buddhism says you are nothing, Advaita Vedanta says you are everything. Their ultimate realization is captured in a famous Sanskrit phrase, Aham Brahmasmi, which means I am the ultimate reality or I am the divine. In this tradition, they teach that your individual ego, your name, your personality, your limitations is just a mask. It is an illusion called Maya. When the ego quiets down through deep contemplation, you don't discover emptiness, you discover the fullness. Imagine a drop of water floating above the ocean. As long as it is separated drop, it is terrified of drying up, falling, or breaking apart. That is the ego. But when the drop finally falls into the ocean, it does not die, it becomes the entire ocean. Aham Brahmasmi is the feeling of the drop hitting the water. When the ego shuts up, you realize that the deep, silent awareness inside you is the exact same awareness that enlivens in the entire universe. You are not a separate person looking at the world, you are the world looking itself. So what happens when the ego quiets down? The scientists look at the monitor and says the default mode network has deactivated. The Buddhist smiles and says, Anatta, there is no self. The Vedantin look around and says, consciousness is one, that is Aham Brahmasmi. They are all describing the exact same human experience from different angles. Looking your sense of I sounds terrible or terrifying to the mind because the mind's entire job is to keep the I alive. But in reality, it is the most beautiful, liberating experience a human being can have. You don't need to live in a cave for 20 years to experience this. You can test it every time you take a deep, conscious breath and step out of the commentary in your head. You can taste it when you listen to someone without judging them or when you immerse yourself fully in a creative task. When the ego quiets down, you don't disappear. The noise disappears. And in that silence, you finally discover who you actually are.